The book of Exodus is a great example of salvation. It shows you that God hears your cry, that God then can deliver you. He delivers you from Pharaoh, a type of Satan. How does he do that? He raises up a deliverer and brings a deliverer into your life. Welcome, 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 saints. This is Dr. Charles A. Moody, and I'm so excited as we continue on in our series, Every Book of the Bible in 20 Minutes or Less. Now that's you, you're going to have to study more because I'm just giving you the introduction and just bringing you into the book. Read, study, pray, pray, pray. I'm just going to just invite you in to give you a brief overview. Today, we're looking at the book of Exodus. Now, the book of Exodus is a very interesting book. It is the second book of the Bible. It continues on the narrative that was started in Genesis. At the end of Genesis, we see Joseph bringing the Israelites into Egypt. We see Joseph working with Pharaoh, moving his people due to the famine in an area right outside of Egypt. And we see them working together and building the infrastructure of Egypt. And we see everything seemingly like it's working pretty good. Exodus enters the story right at the end of Joseph's life. So Joseph passes away, and we see the next Pharaoh coming in, and we see a lot of themes in Exodus. The book of Exodus literally shows us how the people of God left the bondage of Egypt. So when we look at Exodus, it is the gospel of the Old Testament because it tells us a couple of things. It tells us that God's a redeemer. We see God redeeming, buying back, or getting back the people of Egypt, his covenant people. It shows us grace. A lot of people will argue, there's no grace in the Old Testament. Oh, we see a lot of grace in the book of Exodus. We see God's grace through all of his laws, through all of his rituals, through God loving his people and delivering them. We see the redemption of God, one. We see the grace of God, two, that God hears the cries of his people. Three, we see the deliverance of God. So think about it. We got redemption, we got grace, and we got deliverance. These are some of the reasons why Exodus is called the gospel of the Old Testament. We see the faith of people because the people of God then have to move in accordance to what God's word is and what God's leader tells them to do. And we got a relationship with the king because God now presents himself as king and he delivers them unto himself. And we see the birth of God's people. So in Exodus, you're going to see redemption. You'll see grace. You'll see deliverance. You'll see the faith of God's people. You'll see God presenting himself as king. And you'll see God birthing this new nation called Israel. The authorship of Exodus is Moses. That's why we call it the second book of Moses, describing this narrative to how the nation of Israel became who it is. There are four significant relationships in the book of Exodus. The relationship between Moses and God, or Moses and Yahweh. How does that work? How were they introduced? What are the interactions between the two? So if I'm studying the book, I can look at that and say, wow, this is how people of God respond and react to God. This is how God responds and reacts to the people of God or the leader of God. Then we see relationship between Moses and Pharaoh. Moses is a type and shadow or a metaphor or an example of Christ, and Pharaoh is a type and shadow or a metaphor or an example of Satan. So we see this battle between Moses and Pharaoh. It's not a physical battle. They ain't fighting. It's not a physical battle. They're not throwing blows, but literally Moses is standing flat-footed and saying, this is what the Lord is saying, and he is coming at Pharaoh directly, and Pharaoh is then getting more and more stubborn and saying, I'm not going to yield, and you see this increased tension between the two. So first relationship, between Moses and Yahweh. Second relationship you can look at is between Moses and Pharaoh. Third relationship that you can look at, the relationship between Moses and the people. How do the people respond and react to the man of God, and how does the man of God respond and react to them? That interplay and that tension of leading and resistance, of doubting and faith, being courageous as a leader, but being sometimes discouraged by the actions of the people having to listen to the leader and listen to what the leader is saying, despite what they see, having to respond. And so we see that third relationship. Fourth relationship we see is the relationship between people and Yahweh. So think about it. We have Moses and Yahweh, one. We have Moses and Pharaoh, two. We have Moses and the people, 3, and we have the people and God, or the people in Yahweh 4. So when you're looking at the book of Exodus, you can look at these significant relationships. There are 4 of them. Then you can also look at the book of Exodus through the idea of covenant. One is you can look at the covenantal relationship that God is a deliverer, and he delivers people because of his covenant he had with them. He delivers the people of Israel because of the covenant that he made with Abraham in the book of Genesis. God promises Abraham that he's going to bring the people into a place. And we see the fulfillment of that promise by delivering them starting in the book of Exodus. And we also see that when you're in a covenant relationship, 1, you see the covenantal benefit. 2, that means that we see God, because they are people of covenant, God doing miracles, God delivering them from Egypt, God opening up the Red Sea, God meeting their needs with manna, sweetening of the bitter water, all those things. And so we see there's a covenantal benefit, but we also see that there's also a covenantal response and a covenantal demand. There's a relationship between God and his people. That's because of a covenant. We see there's a benefit. When you're in covenant with God, there are certain things that God will do. And we also, the covenant response. The people have an obligation now to respond to him. We see this in Exodus 19 when he says, you see what I've done to the people, and you see what I've done to Egypt, and how I delivered you, and I brought you to myself. This is my covenant. You're my people, and I'm bringing you to myself. So it tells us that being part of the covenant with God is not where God delivers you and restores you so that you can live your best life. Literally, the covenant is God delivers you and God restores you, and you get covenantal benefit by actually making sure that you respond to the covenantal obligations. And so we see those 3 levels of covenant there. When you look at the book of Exodus, you can also look at it looking at the idea of kings. So at the beginning of the book in chapter 1, we see the problems that happened under an earthly king. Joseph passes away, and now there's a new Pharaoh, and we see this new Pharaoh has insecurities. This new Pharaoh is concerned. This new Pharaoh doesn't have relationships, and this new Pharaoh then, because of his lack of relationships and his concerns, he institutes policies that keep people enslaved. He institutes policies of genocide to make sure that he keeps control. And so the problems under an earthly king are issues of insecurity, issues of fear, policies that keep him in power, policies that keep people subjected to him. We also see the second level of kingdom, or the second level where kings are shown in the book of Exodus. We see the promotion and the development of the king's prophet, or the king's deliverer. We see Moses being delivered. Even though there is genocide, we see Moses being delivered through being put in a basket, going down the river, and being brought to Pharaoh's daughter and raised in Pharaoh's court. He's taught all of Pharaoh's warfare and all of the policies. But Moses then grows up even as a young man and wants to be a deliverer. He then acts and reacts outside of the will of God. He acts and reacts in a passionate and emotional way. So even that deliverer can sometimes, their humanity can put them in a position. So we see Moses then reacting, and he kills an Egyptian for mistreating a Hebrew. Because of that action, he buries him and tries to hide it. What happens? He gets found out. He runs away, and he spends 40 years on the other side of the desert learning to work with Jethro's sheep. And he starts to serve this other man and learns how to serve, and learns how to submit. And in a place of solitude, what happens? One day he sees the burning bush. He meets God. And then God tells him, I've got a calling on your life. So we see the development of the prophet, or the development of the leader. So you see, 1, the problem of an earthly king. 2, you see the development of the king's man. 3, what you're going to see is this. After the king's man is developed, you're going to see the clash of kings. What do you mean? That God calls Moses and tells Moses, go back and tell Pharaoh. And so now we see the clash of 2 kings. Pharaoh is the most powerful man on earth. He is known as really the king, and many people believe that he was the son of Ra. From earthly standards, he was the son of the little God. And so he was the closest thing that people knew to God on earth. And so we have the king of earth, Pharaoh, now being approached by the King of Kings, God, and now we have this clash. we have this clash of kings. That Moses goes and tells Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh resists. And we see a series of 10 plagues and 10 things that happen, from Nile water being turned to blood, to locusts, to frogs and flies. All kinds of plagues happen to deliver them. And finally, the 10th plague is the death of the firstborn. Pharaoh then yields. And so we have the king of heaven now saying, these are my people. And remember, when Moses talks to Pharaoh, he says, let my people go. But he says, let my people go so that they may serve me, that they may worship me. That word there, serve, that word there, worship, is abed in the Hebrew. It means to worship. You're never saved just to go live your best life. You're saved because God has called you to be a worshiper. God introduces himself in Exodus 19. I am the Lord your God. I've done these things. I've delivered you out of Egypt. I'm the one who did all this stuff. But I brought you to whom? I brought you to myself. And then he says, you shall be to me a special treasure. You shall be to me. And so now we see, when you have a king, there are responsibilities to a king. He calls them to the covenant with the king. So the clash of the king leads them to being introduced to a king. And then God then says, let me show you how to make a covenant with the king. So I'm going over the entire book. Isn't it very interesting, though? Because now it's making sense. And when you read the book, you're going to say, this makes sense. It culminates then with God saying, build the tabernacle for the king. Since I am your king, now let me tell you how to build a home that is for me. We see this earthly king. We see the deliverer of the king. We see the clash of the kings. We see God delivering them, and that then he introduced himself as a king. We see the covenant of the king. And then we see the building of the tabernacle, the preparation of a place to house the king. This is the book of Exodus. It is a wonderful book because it tells us exactly how God delivers. The book of Exodus is a great example of salvation. It shows you that God hears your cry, that God then can deliver you. What does he deliver you from? Egypt. Egypt is a type of sin. He delivers you from Pharaoh, a type of Satan. How does he do that? He raises up a deliverer and brings the deliverer into your life. Moses, a type of Christ. And then once you are delivered, then what happens? You go through the Red Sea, a type of baptism. So I ask God for deliverance. God raises up a deliverer, a type of Christ. He delivered me from sin. He delivered me from Satan, types of bondage. And then once I get saved, I go through the Red Sea, a type of baptism. From the Red Sea, I go into the wilderness, a type of sanctification. Do you see why Exodus is called the gospel of the Old Testament? It walks you through how your salvation life looks, how your kingdom life looks. And we see this clash of kingdoms. We see this clash of kings. Now, I gave you a brief overview, but it's pretty good, huh? It was pretty good, huh? Now, you say, man, I think I can read that now. It's written in a narrative form, so it's going to be like a story. It's going to be like a soap opera. But if you read it with those eyes, I guarantee you God's going to speak to you. Don't go yet. Remember, like, subscribe, and click the notifications button. Because you say, man, whenever he puts these out, I want to know. Well, listen, I thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. God bless.